Hi, this is Nikki with Scrappy Squirrel. Today I want to show you how to solve a quick little problem that might happen to some of you, and if it hasn't happened to you, consider yourself lucky. So, we all have furry friends, you know, puppies. You can hear mine in the background. And she's moaning. And she decided that the binding on this quilt was not to her liking. So she decided to chew it off. Now, it looks a little extra fuzzy because I went ahead and washed the quilt before I repaired it. So everything's washed and ready to go. But she decided to chew this off. And so, as sad as I was like, okay, not a problem. This is a learning moment. So what I want to show you today is how I'm going to fix this problem. It's a quick and easy way to fix it. I have some fabric left over that I used for the binding. If I didn't, I would just grab another green that looked good and go with it. It doesn't have to be the exact fabric, but I found this fat quarter in my stash and I was like, oh good. So what I did is when I washed the quilt, I threw the fat quarter in there so it could get pre-washed as well, so everything was at the same shrink level. Now the negative to that is that one side of the binding did not fare well in the wash, so I'm going to lose most of this binding right here and I'll trim it off in a moment. The other thing is, you can notice all my binding is straight cut binding. It is not bias cut binding. So some people would say, oh, just round that corner off and fix that edge, which would be a good idea. But the problem is I don't have bias binding, so it's not going to curve nicely. So what I'm going to actually do is do a straight across cut on this one. So I'll just trim it across and I will do a 45-degree turn. It's actually a little less than a 45 degree. It's probably more like a 35-degree turn. But I'm going to show you how to do that. So easy fix to repair. So watch while I fix this and we will get this all back to normal and then I can put on my bed. So I have 4 strips of fabric I cut off of that fat quarter that are pre-washed. And I'm just going to join them together like I normally join binding strips together. All right, pretty to pretty. I'm going to sew from corner to corner. And the nice thing is I have this washi tape on my table. So I love to use this washi tape by Cluck Cluck Sew. And you just get your machine set to the 1/4 inch, pop it on, roll it out, and it's wonderful because then I don't have to draw lines on my fabric all the time. I can just follow the line on my washi tape. I'm going to set my stitch length to 2.0. Now to use the washi tape, I have to set my machine to the exact setting I had it when I set it on there, which is my 1/4 inch setting. So that's fine. So I'm going to go ahead and just start out in the corner. And I'm lining up the vortex of my fabrics with the red line on my washi tape. I'll do a little back tack here. And go all the way down. Get my iron warmed up so it's ready to go. So we can press this in half. So I've sewn that first set together. I'm going to take the top strip, flip it up. It's still attached. And I'm just going to flip it up, grab my next strip, and put it down on top of it, pretty to pretty. I have a little overhang on both sides so I can easily see where the corners are. Same thing again. Start with the needle right there in that little vortex. And the other one, I'm going to just follow along my red line on my washi tape. Last one. The top strip, just going to flip it up and back. Grab my next one. Pretty to pretty. Line it up. So I got that one part lined up with the red line on here, and then my needle is going to start right in that spot right there. It's going to start right there. Go ahead and throw a leader on here just for kicks and giggles. All right, so I have my binding. I'm gonna go ahead and just trim this up. That's not the right scissors. There we go. So I'm gonna cut the little junctions between. I have 4 strips, so that means I have 3 seams. I'm just trimming this extra off so it's out of my way. I'm just eyeballing my 1/4 inch. All those. Okay, there's my strip. Now I'm going to press it in half, just like my regular binding strips, and then we're going to attach it to the binding that's already on the quilt. Okay, so it's going to press it in half. This is hot dog fold, and we're going to do the ugly sides together or the wrong sides of the fabric together. Right, you can't see it on camera, but I do have a little pressing board right here in front of me. So I'm just going to press my fabric in half. When I get to the seam on my binding, it is my choice if I want to press that seam open or press it to one side. There's all different preferences on that, and I choose to just press mine to one side, but I know a lot of people press their seams open. I don't like to press seams open personally because I believe it weakens the seam. So I like to keep mine just pressed to one side, so that way if that seam starts to break down and open up, there's fabric underneath it instead of it just being pulled apart. There's an extra little bit of protection of the green fabric. All right, so I'm just going to get this pressed. I'm almost there. Press is pretty quick since I'm not doing that many strips, just these 4 strips. So I like to do binding on my projects. I used to be a girl who did not like to do binding. I'd do anything to get out of doing binding, but I learned so much from my business partner back when I had my quilt shop, and she was a great inspiration to me, and she was meticulous about her binding. I've had other friends as well that I have in my life now that are meticulous about their binding too, so I'm always picking up tips and tricks on it, and now I enjoy the binding part probably, you know, just like piecing part. I love putting that final piece on there and sealing up what I like to call the Oreo. So when this happened, it was like no big deal. I wasn't too heartbroken. I knew how to fix it. Okay. Now every quilt's going to be different. The way my dog ate it off and the way your dog eats it off, or cat, you know, it might be different. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to trim this across right here and get rid of all this right there. Now, this is kind of rough right here too. It's really chopped up. So I am going to kind of cut it at a little bit of angle. So my quilt is no longer going to be square. Who cares? Still a beautiful quilt, and really on the bed in the long run, nobody's really going to know. This is the bottom right corner of my quilt. So it's tucked in usually anyway in the bed, and nobody hardly sees it. I know it's there, and it's just going to remind me, even, you know, 10, 15 years from now when I don't have my beautiful dog anymore, I'll be like, oh, that is when Dakota ate the quilt. You know, I saw the quilt long after I don't have the dog, and it'll just be a good memory, you know, not a bad memory, because, you know, it's just a learning thing. So again, I'm just going to trim this off, and I'm going to trim down a little bit on the 2 sides where it's got a little bit eaten back from the washing machine, okay? So I'll bring it up here so you can kind of see what I do. It's my 2 times a round board. So first thing I'm going to do is just cut off this corner. I'm not overthinking this here, guys. Really, I don't want you to overthink it. I'm just going to go trim back as little as I have to save as much of my quilt as possible. I actually used this quilt on the bed for probably another week or so after she did this to me. You know, and then it's like, okay, I've got to get it off the bed because I don't want her thinking it's a new snack. She's never done this to any other quilt. I don't know why she decided that day to do that. You know, I don't know. She's always liked socks. Why does I have a problem with her eating socks? But it's the first time she decided to eat the binding off the quilt. Okay, again, like I said, I'm just going to trim up a little bit of this to get rid of the frayed edges. This rubber cutter is not a very good one. I need to put a new blade in it. So, mind you, it's going to be a little bit of a pain. It's got, you can even hear it. It's got a little nick in the blade. Okay. Not overthinking this here, like I said. It's not going to be totally even or straight anymore. It's going to be a little bit of an angle going off. But in the end, it's not really going to matter that much, and you're not going to be able to know. You'll know because you watched me do the video. But general person looking at it, not going to even see it. Okay, do the same thing with this side so you can see it's already getting cleaned up. Looking okay. It's all going to be all right. All right. So when I was a kid, we had, my mom tried to get us a dog a couple times, and just our lives were just too busy. We just didn't have time for a dog and how much attention they needed. But we had a dog who would chew the corners off of quilts and blankets. And my mom used to take old comforters and put a piece of fabric on both sides of it, tack it, and then bind it off. And those were our blankets for our beds. And she did it with fabric we loved. My brother and I both had one. His got ink spilled all over his. She had big ink spots. Mine, the dog ate the corner. And it was that way for years. We never fixed it or repaired it. Just for years and years, it was that way. And it was always just, you know, every time you wash it, it lose a little bit more of its guts out that hole. Okay, so there is my trimmed up piece now. It's all trimmed up. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to look and see where I can add on this binding back on. Okay, so I'm going to look here at this. This side is in pretty good shape. It's a little frayed, but not so much that I'm going to lose it. So I think I'm going to add my binding back in on this side. Yep. So what I'm going to do is just cut it off, give myself a nice straight edge. Then I'm going to take my binding, and just like I did a moment ago, I'm going to go pretty to pretty, but first I'm going to give this a little quick press here. So flip my board over. Keep it up here so you guys can see it. So this is the binding that was on the quilt already. Like I said, it's got a little fray from being washed, but it's only about 1/8 of an inch in, so I'm not worried about the integrity of my binding. Okay. All right. So there's my binding piece. I'm going to take it and add it to this one. Pretty to pretty. Same way I did it before. Now I just got a quilt attached to it, so it's not as easy to manipulate around, but I can still do it. Bother the leader because the next thing I'm going to be doing is sewing binding down onto the quilt. Okay, so there's my new binding strip added on perfectly. I'm going to trim that extra away. Okay, and now I'm just going to go ahead and put it on like I did it before. So how this one was sewn on is sewn onto the back to the front. Okay, so I am going to have to pull out some stitching, a little bit more of the previous stitching, just so I can have a little bit more access here, which is not a big deal. I just need to be able to get it flat on the back side when I start, and we'll be redoing this stitching anyway, so it doesn't matter. Okay. Okay. All right. I think that's enough. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to line up my binding on the back here. And I'm going to take a nice healthy 1/4 inch. So my machine is almost always set for a scant, so I'm going to go back to default. Still using my 2.0 stitch length. I like that tighter stitch. And I'm going to go ahead and stitch this binding on. Starting where I've already got some already sewn, I'm going to overlap and just go down, okay? All right, so. got my my stiletto here. Okay, this quilt's just being a little bulky. It's big. So I'm going to use that stiletto here to help me keep this where I want it. I set my machine to stop the needle down, because then I'll get a more consistent seam. Okay, hear my puppy walking around back behind me. I'm like, Mama, hurry up and get that quilt finished and put it back on the bed. Alright, so I'm just going down. Okay, I'm going to come to one of those corners. Now, because it's not a true 90-degree angle, I'm not going to do the traditional full fold back. I'm just going to do a partial one. Okay, so I'm going to come here and I'm going to stop a 1/4 inch from it like normal. 1/4 inch from that edge. Pull my needle up. I'm going to fold back, but I'm only going to fold at an angle. I'm not going to do the full 45. So maybe you can see this here. It's just a partial fold back. Normally you go straight back and back down, make a big 90-degree. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to do a partial fold back. Okay, so it's not very much there. About 3/4 of an inch, maybe a little over a half, is all that it's folded, because it's not a full 90-degree turn, so I don't need as much fabric to get around that corner. Okay, I will start off the edge and just come onto that fabric. So I'm going to do that twice because I have this at an angle here. Now, had I made bias binding, I would have curved this off and just did a curve, easy peasy, and it would have been okay that one side of my quilt had a curve and the other sides were straight ones. If I wanted to be really crazy, I could take all the binding off, put a new one. No way, Jose. Who has time for that? I have too many other quilts to make. Okay, so again, I'm going to pull it off, make that turn, and it's only, like I said, about 3/4 of an inch of a turn to get that around that corner. All right, get this underneath the presser foot here. I'll hold it up in just a second so you can see it. And because I cleaned up this edge, I'm still taking a healthy 1/4 inch, but I don't have to fret about it as much. Okay, we're going to get to the point we've got to join. Now this other piece of binding is in bad shape. Okay, it really frayed on this one. So what I'm going to do with this one is I'm actually going to pull it back a little more, because remember, I need 12 inches to do the joining to do a really good job. So let me just sew up just a little farther and back tack. Okay, now I'm going to take my other side of my binding and I am going to pop it off. But the difference is I have to pop it off on both sides so I can join it. I need a good 12 inches. So I'm just popping this off here. I'm being very careful because seam rippers are sharp, so I don't want to cut my fabric. I'm just cutting the thread. Okay, I need to go a little farther, so it kills me of taking this much of the binding off, but I have to do a good join. Okay, so again, I'm going to cut off this crappy part. Just go ahead and get rid of it now, because then I know I don't have to deal with it. Okay, crappy part done. Now if I had a cat, that would be like fun for my cat. My cat would be like, yeah, I'm going to chase that string. I have no kitty, just a dog. I love my dog. Okay. All right, so I've got that cleaned up right there. So now what we're going to do traditional joining of binding. Okay, you've probably seen this in multiple videos, but I'm going to show you again. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit this with the iron and fix this edge so I can work with it a little easier because it's all rolled up like it is when you put the binding on. So let me just hit it with the iron so I can have a better edge to work with and do a cleaner job of combining these two. Look nicer too for you to see it on the video. Okay. All right. So, here we go. All right. So we're going to take this piece here. I'm going to straighten this edge just a little bit more. Scissors go. I hate them. Right there. Didn't do quite as straight as cut up as I wanted to a while ago. More crazy threads to get rid of. Okay. All right. So traditional way I'm going to do the binding. I'm going to cut a piece off of the other end where I've got a lot of extra. That is now my measuring piece. Okay, I want to make sure these overlap the exact distance of the binding. So I'm going to take my piece and lay it up here, matching up the raw edge where I cut it to the edge of this. This is the piece of binding unfolded. That's how I get the 2.5 inches. But I'm using my binding to make sure. Okay, and then I'm just going to go to the where it overlaps right here, and I'm going to cut it. That means I get the exact amount. I actually, when I do this, like to cut it just a smidge, and I do mean a smidge shorter, okay? I don't know if you can see that. It's just a smidge shorter than that piece, okay? But that was my measuring piece. I learned that from my friend Mary Beth, and great trick. There's tools out there, and I've taught them. There are special rulers, and those sometimes give people more confidence, and I think those are great. For me, all I need is that little piece of binding. Okay. So now we're going to take our pieces, okay, and we're going to join them together. Okay. My thumb is in it. My thumb is in my pieces. Pull this one up. Pull this one up. My thumb is inside of them, right? Pull this one up. Pretty to pretty. Okay. Now, because this other piece is kind of short, because it's already attached, this is the same as if I was doing regular binding on my quilt. I may want to put a couple pins in this just to make my job a smidge easier. So if I want to just throw a pin in it or two, I'm going to put them where I don't have to move them while I'm sewing. Okay, so corner to corner. Now I was lucky enough to have the same fabric. If you didn't, just grab something else. Make it even more of a point where it is something to talk about. Put a totally different fabric. I mean, wouldn't it be funny to put a fabric that had like dog paws on it or something? Be like, yep, that's where my dog ate it and I had to repair it, so I made a little tribute to my dog by putting dog paw fabric where I repaired it. Okay, take my pins out. Before I cut anything, I'm gonna check it. Okay, so I go to check it. It's laying exactly like I need it to. It looks twisted because it's the way it's added on here, but it's not, okay? So it's good, so I can go ahead and trim out the extra. Cut out this extra fabric. Okay. And I do need to pop the back side off a little bit more because I popped the front and back off the same amount, and I needed to pop just the back off a little farther. This is just so I can get it to lay flat. Try not to cut my fabric. My seam ripper. They're sharp. I've seen it happen so many times and people get so sad, which I would be sad too. Okay, so now I'm going to put my fabric in quilt back in the machine, and I'm gonna go ahead and finish attaching this binding the traditional way on the back side, the way I like to do it, back to front. I overlap where I stopped. So excited. I'm gonna go remake the bed because I have my winter quilt on, and I know it's still February, okay, but I need 4 seasons, baby, on my bed of all my quilts. I need full seasons to get these quilts on here. So this is my spring, and I'm gonna go ahead and put it on because I live in Texas now. So, you know, warmer weather is not far away. And I've had my other quilt on since the fall. I put it on in November. I don't have a Christmas quilt for my bed yet. So I'm like, it's had its time. It's time for something fresh. So I'm gonna throw this one on for the next couple months. Before I put my fall quilt on, I had a mountain quilt on our bed. Okay. Coming up here. And I'm gonna overlap where I stopped. Okay, so let me show you where I did those joins. My Care Bear hangs out up here. Okay, there's those not joins, excuse me, those turns. So remember I did that 35-degree-ish turn, okay? It's not technical, okay? But I didn't do full 90, so I don't have a big flap here. I only have a small flap because I don't have a lot of curve to get around, okay? So there's where I did those. You can see they're just a partial turn. Same way if I was doing like a octagon table topper, I would do the same kind of turns, okay? So now, traditionally I'm gonna go down and hit this with my iron and kind of push it so it naturally goes the way I want it to go. I'll bring it up here so you can see it. All right, so I'm just gonna hit this with the iron, and that just kind of helps it fold over a little nicer for me. Helps me have a little easier time when I'm doing the next part. Got plenty of fabric on those corners. If you don't do this on your quilts, I'll tell you, it makes a big difference when you're going to handle that binding. If you just give it this little press, just makes it a little easier. Hold on a second. My son's just trying to get in the door and I've got it locked. I'm home from school. All right, so I've got that turned, okay, I've got it pressed. So now it's time to just put it back on the machine. I'm gonna switch from my 1/4-inch foot to my regular A-foot, my regular foot that I sew with all the time. So when I'm not piecing, this is my generic foot to use, okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and stitch. I've got it on the front side. I'm going to stitch close to the edge without falling off. I'm going to stitch close to the edge without falling off. Okay. I have a white thread in here, creamy white. That's what I used when I put this binding on originally, so it matches. Had I used a green, I would put a green on, you know. I want to make this look like it's not as like you immediately look and go, oh, there's a repair job. No, it's, oh, you repaired that? Really? Wow, that's kind of fits in pretty well. If it wasn't for the fact you had to cut off the corner. Okay, I do my stitch length at, when I do the binding on this side, either a 2.2 or a 2.5 when I do it on this side. So just a smidge bigger, just because I'm going through so many layers. So I'm always smoothing down as I go, tucking through rogue threads. My machine's set to stop the needle down all the way. Okay, I have my coffee up here. My daughter-in-law gave me this beautiful cup for Christmas. So I'm gonna move that over here so I don't actually bump it, knock it off, make a big mess. Because then aside from having to patch binding, I'll have to be stain treating. All right, so here we go. All the way down.
Hey, down.
All right, so I'm going to keep stitching all the way down on this quilt, just following along the edge of my binding, close to the edge without falling off. My dog is excited because my little boy just walked in. He's not so little anymore. He's a tween. So we're just going to go all the way down. I'm going to go to one of those corners in just a minute, and I'm going to show you how we turn those corners. Okay, my corners the same way I did them before. Just going to come into them, and I'm going to prep them before I get to them. So it's just sliding it in and folding it over. And I'm going to develop that 30-degree turn. Okay? So I'm going to bring it in. And you're going to have to finagle a little bit because it's a different turn. It's not a straight 90. So to me, it doesn't always want to turn as smoothly as the 90s, but it still will turn and get a nice corner. The key is we want a corner that the dog doesn't want to eat, right? I mean, that would be ideal. I'm going to use my stiletto here to punch this out a little bit more. Get a crisper corner to what I want. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and sew down. Nice thing is my boy's going to play in his room, so that way he's not interrupting my video. So hopefully you won't hear him playing in his room while I'm filming here. Okay, and I'm just going to hold it with the edge of my stiletto. I love the stiletto because I can go right up to the needle with it. When I get to that corner, I'm going to stop the needle in it and turn. It's not a full 90 turn, it's just a short turn. I'm going to sew about halfway to the next corner, and I'll do the next one. I'm going to finagle it, get it where it wants to be. And it's not a set turn, you know, I mean, it's not a set 30 degrees, because 35 degrees. It's just kind of how I had to make it roll because of what I had to cut off. The dog wants to play with my little guy, so she's in there scratching the door, wanting him to let her in. He is like any other little boy and tends to get a little overexcited, and sometimes they get in trouble, the two of them together, because they wrestle, and they're not supposed to wrestle, because we want our puppy to be gentle. I'm fighting this one a little bit. Give me a second. This is normal. It's not that I'm fighting it. I'm just particular to make it fold as neat as possible. I want it to look perfect, you know, in the video when I'm showing you how to fix this. And it's not wanting to look perfect because I'm human too. Okay? See if I can get it to just do it. It's going to have a little bit of a bump in it, but that's okay. Like I said, as long as it's not so much that it tempts the dog to come eat it again. So like I said, this corner isn't going to look as flat and beautiful as I wanted it. It's got a little ripple in it. And maybe that means I should have put a little bit more in that turn, but I think I put too much in it. I think I should have went more for 1/2 inch of a fold instead of a 3/4 inch fold, because the problem I have is I have too much bulk right there. And that's the issue you have when you're doing those curve bind, you know, curves. When you're doing those smaller turns, not doing a 90, we're used to putting a full big triangle of fold in there. And now we're just putting a small fold. And again, I thought I was getting the right amount of fold, but I didn't quite. I got a little too much still. So I was trimming off some more of those rogue hairs from it getting washed. Coming all the way down. Almost back to where I started, or where I pulled it up from. Not where I started, because I didn't have to go around the whole quilt. Back tack. Trim our threads, front and back side. And I know I do a good job when it stays right there next to the binding. Next to the binding where I want it in a nice line. Okay, so here's the thing. The back looks better than the front. I told you I was gonna have that little fold, and I had the little fold. Also, I had a seam right there too, so it's like double evil right there. So I've got a fold and a seam. The back doesn't look too bad. Is it perfect? No, but this is just a fix. Here's the thing. My quilt now has binding back on it. I can throw it back on my bed. It's not going to continue to unravel. It's not going to lose its guts, and it gets to have more love and more time. And of course, I'm still going to let the dog sleep at the foot of the bed. I hope you enjoyed this video of my quick tip on how to fix a dog-eaten quilt. Thanks so much. Have some scrappy fun, and when life gives you scraps, make quilts. Thanks so much, and have a blessed day.